Okay. How's everybody doing today?
A little warm, but it's
All right. So my MO when I present is I fire hose people with data, just an alarming amount of data in a very fast pace. So hang on. So critical minerals. As we look at the green energy transition, it's just stunning the amount of metals that are going to be needed. Everything from copper to aluminum, all the PGMs, silver. It's just astonishing what's coming our way. So there is a mineral major cycle coming our way. Yeah, it's a good time to be in recycling. Absolutely. You guys, it's only going to get better. Prices are only going to climb. That's a fact. So my name is Matt Watson. Again, I'm based on the West Coast. I'm a Silicon Valley product. Kind of grew up in the electronics industry. That was my first foray into precious metals, working with Seagate. They handed me $560 billion worth of platinum and ruthenium responsibility one day and said, go. And I haven't left the precious metals world since. Have evolved into becoming an analyst. I work with scrap folks. I work with recyclers. I work with the major processors. I do a number of subscription reports. I'm sorry this is a strange format to display in, but I focus primarily on the precious metals. One of the reports that's got a lot of traction is this clean energy transition discussion. When I get into, hey, we're going to miss big time these batteries and copper and everything in general. We can't mine it quick enough. You guys don't realize the disconnect coming our way. That report's had a lot of traction. I do a lot of speaking events. I'm on Kitco a number of times in different forums where I keynote at mining conferences. There's links here where you could find me on YouTube and you could listen to my pitches, which will be slower than this one. There's a couple macro level trends that are really driving this whole discussion. Oh, good, it's not corrupt here. One is just the cost of renewable energy is coming down. And you guys, why does that tie into EVs? It absolutely ties into EVs and the vision that they have for how they're going to transform our power grids to charge all these EVs. By the way, if you get about 2 billion EVs on the road, you have to take our power grid today globally, and you have to grow it by 50% just to support the charging requirements for all those 2 billion EVs. So yeah, the power grid needs to transform as well as the vehicles themselves. On the right-hand side is IRENA, the International Renewable and Energy Agency. They keep revamping their roadmap out through 2050. And the latest roadmap is just astonishing how much solar and wind that they're asking for. Just a phenomenal amount of metal. By the way, there goes a lot of copper and silver. And the other major macro trend is just the electrification of everything. And you guys see this just like I do in our everyday lives. I mean, there's not a damn appliance that we buy today that isn't connected on the internet, right? I mean, that's one of the problems with the supply chain now. I mean, try to find a dumb washing machine or, you almost can't do it anymore. There's too many chips involved. So you've got all these transitions going on, including EVs, 5G, and all the extra electronics that goes for the ride there. Smart buildings and homes, smart cities. They're going to start putting sensors on everything about the utilities. And just the number of connected devices. We're growing from over about 2 billion connected devices today. Don't worry, that's going to double by 2024. Just an astonishing rate of connectivity is growing. But the fundamental disconnect, there's no supply chain people in the discussion. It's all our eyes are bigger than our stomach. Yeah, we want all this stuff. And the funny thing about electrifying everything is electrons pass through metals. You need those damn minerals to make this whole thing work. It just doesn't pass through the air. And so there is a big disconnect with the mining community. And just to put it simply, in the past 30 years, we needed to mine this much stuff. In the next 30 years, we need to mine this much stuff. And from an investment perspective, well, obviously the mining investment needs to grow substantially. Well, the mining investment just isn't lined up for all this expansion, the way it's going to need to evolve. And then, of course, you guys know this as auto recyclers. These things aren't cars, these are computers on wheels. In fact, distinguishing between auto scrap and e-waste, I don't know, it's becoming a fine line. What's the difference anymore? It's about the same, right? There's so much computers and technologies and sensors on board, it's changed dramatically. And so ICE vehicles today, when you look at the electronics cost of manufacturing an ICE vehicle today, some 35 to 40% of the car cost is electronics and creeping up. You move into hybrids, it's now you're about to 50% land. You move into full range BEVs, a la Tesla, 70% of the Tesla cost is electronics related. And what's beyond that? Fuel cell electric vehicles. It goes up even higher. And somewhere out there is autonomous vehicles, which is not a pipe dream. I was next to autonomous vehicles about 5 years ago when Menlo Park freaked the hell out of me as I looked over at the car next to me and there's nobody at the wheel. I proceeded to follow that sucker for about 10 miles. It was great to look at. But the amount of electronics being packed in here, I mean, there's at least 12 CPUs on board these days, 12 logic chips that are driving engine function, emission control systems, the bodies, the infotainment, on and on. Some of these clean energy communities are aware that this is going to tax mining. There's a great set of reports from the IEA. You could Google them or you could go to YouTube and look up IEA critical minerals. And they have a nice glossy 100+ page PowerPoint that talks about, oh shit, this is what we're going to need, including lithium. Between now and 2040, you got to grow lithium mining by, oh, don't worry, 42x. Hello. Is that going to happen? You got to grow graphite 25x. You got to grow cobalt 21x. Nickel 19x. Rare earths 7x. Silver's got to more than double. PGMs, in my mind, need to double. Interesting. So here's where I'm going to start fire hosing you. So I do a bunch of high-low cases. My low cases, I talked about this EV powertrain mix. I'll show you what that looks like versus a zero emission, kind of an idealistic clean energy state where they want to convert everything. Solar PV, half of what IRENA wants versus all of what they want. Wind, half of what they want versus all of it. Fuel cell vehicles, same thing, on and on. And I hope this next slide didn't get corrupted. Okay, zero emission vehicles. To me, I think they're just whistling in the wind. Here's a listing of all the different countries that are making these mandates that they're going to go zero emission. By the way, when they're talking about zero emission, they're talking about killing hybrids. They're talking about killing hybrids and plug-in hybrids at the same time. By the way, for those of you who deal in those batteries, you know the battery size in terms of kilowatt hours is vastly different. The battery in a Tesla is anywhere from 10x to 18x larger than the battery in a Toyota Prius, type of a small hybrid. A Tesla battery is 1,100 to 1,300 pounds of battery. And when you scale that against 90 million vehicles, that's a lot of millions of metric tons of minerals needed. At the bottom there, I do statistics on what each of these countries' declarations, what that represents in terms of vehicle mix that's going to be needed to meet this transition. On the left-hand side, I have what I call my base case of transition. On the right-hand side is that zero emission state. Up top, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a little white color. I don't have a pointer, but there's a white color for fuel cell electric vehicles. Penetration there is going to be dramatically limited. Why? Because of my famed platinum, ruthenium, and iridium. Not the same three PGMs you deal with in AutoCAD, which are palladium, rhodium, and platinum. It's going to be platinum, rhodium, and iridium. Everything about the hydrogen economy involves those three. Those will become the hot three commodity. Platinum prices will climb in time. By the time we get to 2030, platinum is going to be a vastly different market. Palladium is going to fold over, by the way. Bummer. Why? Because of what the work you guys are doing. There's 1.5 billion ICE vehicles on the road yet to be recycled with higher loadings of palladium starting some 15 years ago. So as those are harvested, there's going to be a surge in palladium supply. But in any event, when you look at the battery mix, I'm going to try to get over here. So the green is BEVs, full-range Teslas. Yellows are the hybrids and plug-in hybrids, smaller batteries. The gray and the blue are diesel and gasoline vehicle mix. And so I think the transition on the battery is going to be, we're going to be limited on the mining to something like that base case on the left. We're not going to be able to sprint as fast as they want to hit those zero emission mandates. And by the way, killing those hybrids and plug-in hybrids, I think, is one of the worst strategies you could have from a clean energy perspective and CO2 impact. The only way Europe has hit their CO2 emissions targets, according to the Paris Climate Accord, is because of the sales of that variety of vehicle. It's not the big-ass 300-mile-plus range BEV. It's the hybrids that have improved the CO2 emissions. And yet you want to ban that? Interesting. There's a line on the red that goes to the right-hand axis that talks about the battery demand, and I translate all this into terawatts of battery demand. And so my base case is about 6 terawatts of battery demand by 2050. as opposed to somewhere in the range of 15 terawatts of battery demand in the zero emission case. This accounts for recycle, which you guys are going to support, but it's an awful lot of metals. What metals? Well, let's get into that real quick, and this is where I'm really going to fly. Well, first of all, I want to talk about this again in the context of mining CAGR. So that solid red line is that same terawatts of battery demand for light duty and heavy duty, and I just expressed in terms of CAGR what it means to get there. Mining needs to have a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate of 15.5% year over year growth to hit that end zero emission state for 30 years straight. I don't care what technology you're into, 15% CAGR, boy, that's hustling. That's a very high rate of growth. For 30 years straight, boy howdy. Not going to happen. We're going to miss some of these zero emission transition dates, and I think specifically 2030 and 35 are going to be very difficult. I think we're going to hear a lot about lithium and nickel constraints in the 2027 timeframe. Lithium-ion batteries are not all the same. These are all lithium-ion battery chemistries, if you're not familiar with them. Nice little cheat sheet. On the right, I have a table with dollars, US dollars per metric ton. So cobalt being the most expensive, nickel next, and you get into all these other metals, including the yellow is the lithium. You notice there's lithium is constant in all these things. Ranges between 8 and 11% composition in all these different varieties. LFP, the lithium iron phosphate variety. You know, you go to battery conferences a couple years ago, and the engineers, they all wanted nickel-rich configurations for their EVs. And from a recycle perspective, those are the ones that have the greatest value. And yet, what you're hearing companies make announcements, including Tesla and Volkswagen, is they're going to do more LFPs. Why? They can't get enough nickel. They can't get enough cobalt. And even though those configurations, that LFP has a lower energy density, they really don't have a choice if you're going to scale. And so you're going to see some adjustments in selections of chemistries just to fit scalability. What can we do? Unfortunately, from a cost perspective, from a recycling, we can recycle every one of these technologies, can be recycled. The process exists. The problem is the treatment charges on LFP in particular, you're underwater. Your treatment charges are more expensive than the metal you recover. In Europe, their solution to this is basically the OEMs, the automotive OEMs are on the hook for the recycle and treatment charges. So people like Umicore and others who do the physical recycling, they get paid. We have nothing like that in the US or in Asia yet at all. So legislation is going to be needed to get those LFPs to be economical to recycle. Meanwhile, you're going to hear what we're going to hear from our board or our panel here. You know, today there's people that have a business proposition where they'll take the full mix, and there's enough nickel and cobalt in enough of the batteries that they can make value in the whole collection, if you will. But this is a problem that needs to be dealt with. Designers all want higher nickel and lower cobalt type of configurations for energy density. There's no doubt about it. And lithium, my base case on the left versus that zero emission case on the right, we're going to hit a wall. We're going to hit a wall. They're expanding Western Australian spodumene rock deposit. China's buying out Western Australia to get the lithium it needs. The bulk of the lithium is in salt flats, including about over 56% of the world's reserves are at 12,000 plus feet in the Andes Mountains. Yeah, by the way, you need about 500,000 gallons of fresh water for every 1 ton of lithium extracted with the processes we have today. Ooh, that's a bummer. There's not a lot of water up there. There's problems getting there. Lots of technology problems I can walk you through getting there. Cobalt, it's a problem. They're trying to decline this. The problem with cobalt is it comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is a political mess. 90% of the population lives in extreme poverty, and it's just a corrupt nation. 30% of the real estate of that country is controlled by militias for the past 2 decades. Nickel, huge explosion in the demands for nickel. By the way, nickel's fairly dirty to process. Big CO2 footprint just in smelting it and the ore bodies. And the ore bodies are only going to decline. And more they're going to have to deal with nickel that has iron in it and do an extra smelting step or do a high pressure acid leach process on it. Emission control, auto catalyst demand. This is for new builds. So I've got the three metals stacked on top of each other, base case versus the zero emission case. So this will have a profound impact on some of these metals depending on how far the penetration rates go. What about the recycle side for you guys? They're going to recycle. How much longer are we going to get money out of AutoCats? Well, let's keep it simple. Those things, you guys know the answers more than I do. We're approaching 19 plus years of average life at scrappage on ICE vehicles. So this is your palladium picture. The demand is in that light color and the recovery, the recycles in that, the darker tone color. We're getting about half of what goes into the original design back. There's emissions over the life of the AutoCat where the catalytic converter emits some of those metals into the environment. They're not all coming back. It's not a refine loss or a collection loss. A lot of it gets dispersed onto the roadsides. So there's a lot of palladium coming back our way. This surge in recycling will lower the prices of palladium, I would estimate no later than 2030. You'll see prices on palladium begin to drop. Platinum will be climbing, but palladium will drop. Platinum and rhodium, the same thing, where the lighter color is how much is in the demand versus how much is in the recycle. Guys, you got plenty of years left of effective recycle on the CAT converters. Don't worry about it. Copper and silver, you go electrify everything, including EVs. Boy, that copper is going to become very important. So is the silver. Here's the total net copper demand. It's enormous. It's enormous. And highlighted in the red at the top of the base case and that zero emissions case is all the renewables. Renewables just accelerate the copper demand, including all this EV demand. Loadings of copper in EVs are 3 times higher than in an ICE vehicle. Solar uses more. Wind uses more. Boy, it's looking good for copper these days. Little quick tidbit. We've mined X amount of copper, 560 million tons of copper in the past 1,000 years. Great, we need to double that in the next 30. Oh, and I could walk you through some of how that's going to be a struggle. You think copper recycling isn't going to be important? Silver, another one. 10% of the global silver supply goes into solar panels. Don't worry, they want to grow solar panel production by a factor of roughly 50. Where's the silver going to come from? There's about a troy ounce of silver in every vehicle today and growing. Interesting. I show the loadings, that'll be in there. They'll show you the loadings on different configurations. And platinum group metals, I really just don't have time for this, but again, the platinum, the big three, platinum, iridium, and ruthenium will be key to both generating green hydrogen as well as what goes into the vehicles themselves. We're going to become platinum constrained. All your platinum recycle, it's just not going to be enough. I'm advocating for the PGM miners to double their rate of mining. So there's the platinum supply and demand outlook through 2050 in both cases. More mining's needed, and I show in context relative to 100% is the 100% of today's known global resources. Above that, you get into what's called inferred resources. We know where it's at, but it's too expensive to extract at today's prices. The ore grade is too low or whatever. Battery metals, we're going to take up everything that we know about. Electrification, we're going to take up everything that we know about. PGMs, there's actually a lot more there in South Africa. The bad news there, it's a half mile to a mile deep and really expensive to get to. So recycle, yeah, it's a great time to be in recycle. I think the outlook overall for you guys is phenomenal. And you are such an important part of this total system. I went really fast, that was it. Everybody okay?
Great to be here with you this morning. Thank you. I'm from Cox Automotive. We are a 120-year-old family-owned company, have touched and do touch today every phase of the vehicle in its life cycle. And we are strategically steering our business to support electrification, right? We believe in the closed loop ecosystem and caretaking of EV batteries. We've made a bunch of investments. 2019, we invested in Rivian. We've invested in battery health with patents and partnerships with Spiers New Technologies, and a lot of that capability is surfacing at our 75 Mannheim wholesale auctions. But most importantly, last quarter we acquired Spiers New Technologies, really the foundational capability in this vision to have this global network of EV battery service centers, and Dirk can talk more about that, but to me it's all about innovation, right? The information that was presented is current state, but there's a lot of capabilities that haven't yet been brought to the forefront around extending the first life of the battery or recycling, which is going to make a major impact on the data sets that you've seen here.
So update of what we do. First of all, what do? We do life cycle management of advanced battery packs, so lithium-ion packs and also nickel metal hydride hybrid packs. What we do is the logistics, warehousing, dealer fulfillment logistics, both forward and reverse. We do remanufacturing, so we turn a battery pack, we extend the economic life if it breaks, and we send it back into the vehicle. We do repurposing, also known as second life. If it can't go back into a vehicle, can we use it for energy storage? With solar or wind or backup. And the last thing is recycling. And when I mentioned recycling, my recycling is different than your recycling. It's focused on the battery, and we turn it into black powder or black mass, and then other people can refine that further into an hydroxide or a sulfate or even a cathode powder, and then it can be reused again in a new battery pack. So that's what we do. We do it for the majority of OEMs in the United States, with the exception of Tesla, but I would say we have about 70% of the market, 75% of the market. We do a lot of reman, a lot of logistics, dealer fulfillment. We also have a facility in Europe, and we are expanding in Europe, including the UK, which is not part of the European market anymore, but still in Europe. We understand the need to get all those battery packs back because there is value in it, absolutely. And we are indeed in a crunch for key materials. And we always say, why would you go to the Congo for your cobalt if you can go to Oklahoma City, and that's where we're based, and get it there? So recycling is very important, and that whole reverse logistic is very, very important. We're based in Oklahoma City, which is in the middle of the country. I have a funny accent, I'm Dutch. So I'm the odd one out in Oklahoma. We have a facility in Detroit. We are opening up on the West Coast. We are partnering with Mannheim to get a better collection scheme for batteries. And also what is very important, as Matt showed, there are many different kinds of chemistries and there are many different kinds of battery packs. We're working on a tool that you can scan, and it tells you what kind of battery you have. And if you know what kind of battery you have, then you have a better idea of what is the value from that battery pack. Because LFP has lower value, or might be a liability, compared to, say, NMC, which has a lot of nickel and some cobalt in it. Yeah, so in the history of recycling battery packs, nickel metal hydride, which is a hybrid battery pack, which is used in the Prius, which is used in the Honda, you mentioned that, Daniel. There is always an intrinsic value because it has a lot of nickel. And it's quite simple to transport and everything. So there's always a positive price associated with those battery packs. If you have LFP battery packs, that's iron phosphate, the price for those metals is relatively low, and that's why it's becoming popular again, because you have a stable price curve if you make new battery packs. There, the cost, and there I agree with Matt, the cost of recycling is higher than the proceeds of those metals. So there, it's a negative business case. But for nickel and cobalt and everything, NMC, battery packs, NCA, even LMO, there is a positive case. A couple of years ago, recycling of lithium-ion was always a cost, was always a liability. But there is so much happening on a technology level to make the cost of recycling lower and make the proceeds of what you end up with higher, so the purity and everything, that now I would say for the majority of NMC battery packs, you can make a profit. So that's fantastic, because you said something that the Europeans had a better system because legislation makes it more economical. Legislation will make nothing economical. It forces, however, a structure. And we very much believe that it is better to have less legislation and have more a positive business case where everyone makes money and then it starts to work rather than legislation. And we are starting to see that's happening. And that switch point from being a cost, a liability, to making money is happening now. Yeah. And that's fantastic. That is fantastic. And if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would it happen? I don't think I thought it would happen. But it is happening right now.
And I think the accelerant, too, for all this, it comes back to transparency and confidence and kind of the asset and being able to understand it. And from Cox Automotive's perspective, we've got 2 big marketplaces, well, 3, Kelley Blue Book, Auto Trader, Manheim, right? The foundation of those marketplaces is confidence and transparency in data sets. So back to what Dirk was talking about with the scan tool, enabling your businesses to understand the value of that asset. When was it born? What chemistry is it? What vehicle did it originate from? Start the origin of a digital record of that asset is one great way to accelerate the growth and sort of ease the friction of logistics and decision making that exists today. And just like Dirk said, we're investing ahead to explore aggregation points through Manheim. Dirk is set up in Oklahoma City with pre-treatment recycling capabilities to process those batteries. So the way the environment is working is starting to come together in the absence of what Dirk said, some coordinated federal legislation. It's something we're exploring, absolutely. And it all comes down to being able to safely store those, understand the inventory of those assets, and I think it also gives birth to something like a digital marketplace, right? Just like a wholesale marketplace for vehicles, suddenly if you can expose the characteristics that matter for buying and selling of battery packs, that unlocks a lot of potential as well.
I think if you start to collect and store battery packs on your premises, you take a risk. And I would not take that. Personally, I would not take that risk. I would get rid of them in a positive way. Because also, if you guys all start to hoard battery packs for speculation, you're going to get regulated. And you know that the EPA is going to see you as a source of waste material or hazardous waste material. So the question at breakfast this morning is that we would say, we would take your batteries. We would not pay for it, but we would take it. But what I'm afraid of is that you start to pick the good stuff out of your pile and you sell that on eBay or to someone else, and you sell me, and you send me the crap. So then I can't make an economic model, and therefore I don't want your batteries. What can you do with a return battery pack? You can see if you can repurpose it, and repurposing is you put it in a different, for energy storage in a different environment than its original purpose.
Toyota's doing that out west.
Say that again?
Toyota's doing that out west. I think they're powering.
Yeah, they're not.
It's small scale.
It's yeah, but it's.
And I think that's indicative of the industry. It's all very niche.
Sure.
But they don't do it. They have nickel metal hydride. Nickel metal hydride you never use for energy storage. They do it because it's funny and it looks nice in a brochure, but it's bullshit. So the thing is, repurposing, at the moment it's very difficult to make money in it. Also because you need to have substantial flow so that you can really optimize that whole supply line and grade it and everything. And if Matt says, we're running out of material, then why repurpose it? I'm not saying I agree with that or not, but why repurpose it? We need those metals, so pulverize it, refine it back to cathode powder, it goes straight into another battery pack. So second life, I think, is a work in progress right now. And we don't really know how that will work out economically. And you need a lot more supply than you see right now to make it work.
And just to add to this discussion, so the big discussion on repurposing is almost always about storage. People don't realize as you get into more wind and solar, those things are called variable renewables for a reason. They're not always on, they're variable. And yet when you look at the power demand pretty much throughout the states, that the peak is in the evening hours from 5 to about 10 or 11 p.m. And so battery usage, even in a depleted state, in a repurposed mode, where its efficiencies have dropped, but still you can get years of life out of it is a discussion in the storage community. I've consulted with the country of India on this topic. They are looking at that as being a significant global repurposer. I'm more with you. I think you're better off chopping them up and getting them back productively into the supply chain. There's even CO2 footprint issues, again, with there's ESG issues with mining these metals, the nickel and the cobalt in particular. They're so much cleaner the second time around. I had a chart, Becky cut me off, but the CO2 emissions on a recycled versus mined, it's night and day, right? It's really profound. And so, to Dirk's point, getting these back into the system is even a green and efficient play, as opposed to trying to squeeze 5 more years of life out of a very aged and depleted battery.
Now, I think urban mining, is a golden business, excuse the pun. Everyone should do more golden mining because I think there's a lot of money to be made there. On an electric car, first of all, the failure rate of an electric car is a lot lower than a combustion engine car because there are a lot fewer parts. So I think that is a positive, and it's a positive for the consumer. What can go wrong with an electric car? Now the motor rarely breaks because the motor has been around for I don't know how long. It's in your toothbrush, it's in your coffee machine. It has been around for a long, long time, and I think it's very, very reliable. Then a couple of electronics, inverter and everything. I don't see that break often either. The battery pack, yes. And there are 2 things what can happen with a battery pack. You can see capacity go down, which is normal. You see that in an ICE car as well. Capacity slowly goes down, but it can also break because there is a loose sensor, there's a loose connection, stuff happens. But I think that the failure rate of batteries is lower than engines and transmissions. And yes, first...
That's bad for us.
The longevity. Yeah.
Yeah, but therefore you should not stop something what is good for the consumer. You know what I mean? It's like, see the big picture, and you can still make money here with the battery packs. But yes, first responders are trained, are certified and everything. People who are trained know how to work on those battery packs. I don't think anyone should open a battery pack without real deep knowledge. It is between 5 and 1,000 volts. So if you make a mistake, you're literally toast. Yes, so training is very important. But I think it is a great opportunity for the industry. When you have a status quo, there is not much you can do. Money-wise, it's not a challenge or whatever. When there is a real change, then you can really make some money. And I think it's a great opportunity for the industry, especially this industry, because we need those metals back, as Matt says.
Yeah, and I think part of the function is the maturity of the industry, right? It's early days, especially in lithium ion. So there are just not many end-of-life vehicles aside from collision, and in that case, it's damaged, defective, and it's not going to enter the food stream again. Like it has to be processed and given a certificate of destruction or recycling.
You will take out the battery pack and then let someone else deal with the battery pack.
Yeah, because it's almost a parallel would be the dealer today, right? As they're investing to support the electric vehicle versus combustion, it's new training, new technology, investments in equipment and infrastructure, and there's a parallel for your industry as well. But I think in general, the philosophy has been, handling labor, but then get that asset into the hands of an expert that is better positioned to process that into its next phase.
And Jim, we're already urban mining. You're already urban mining the auto catalyst, right? You see your part that you're playing. And then that's why United Catalyst is involved in it, is that we're already helping you bring your precious metals into the supply stream. And what we want to be able to do is partner and help get you educated on how to transport, how we can help you. Like I said, there's a few of us who have already signed up with the Department of Energy that are getting our license so that we can take them as collection points or at least help you get them there.
I think the mindset we need to teach people and legislators is when people talk about waste, in our industry there is no waste. What is waste for someone is the beginning, for us.
It's a bigger question, right? Because the battery is different than your average part, right? So it's a perishable asset to some extent, and it has all of this liability it brings with it if it catches fire and whose custody was it in, and if you sold it to someone who's responsible. So I think there's a lot of frameworks that need to be figured out, and where it makes sense, I think legislation will play a role. But I also agree with Dirk that the industry should continue to innovate and find economically viable and environmentally viable solutions.
So in the EU, that's the only thing that sustains the majority of the recyclers is this kickback they get from the recyclability of the product from the EU, from sustainer responsibility.
Yeah.
So that is completely legislated.
But the Europe is also very hypocritical because everything has rules and legislation and everyone looks from the outside and say it's wonderful. But then if you can sell that battery pack to Africa, if you export it, that's within the rules. Now that's bullshit. That's just like,
that's a good point.
that is landfill. So
to Dirk's point, so many of these LFPs out of Europe, they're being collected and they're being treated like e-waste, where they're just shipping it to Asia and to Africa, right? And they're dumping. And so the law has a hole in the system, and I think the Europeans are aware of this. So I think there's going to be a round of tightening up that loop.
That's good.
Right. But to the point on legislation, though, again, I think the legislation is going to be needed on the recycle. So I do differ with Dirk on this, and I just simply point to the prices of metals, guys. I mean, let's look. Nickel just touched 20,000 plus a ton again today. Copper is sitting there just under $10,000 a ton again. Record highs on these metals, right? Zinc, aluminum, the PGMs, are skyrocketing again. So where's this metal going to come from? And the other forced recycle I think needs to happen, and I'm hot on the subject, this isn't the right forum for it, but it's the silver on solar panels, which again are underwater, but we're going to need that silver back. There's only about 60 years worth more of silver that's in the Earth's crust. So we can't just keep throwing it into landfills. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing urban mining, literally recycling landfills, right? And so this is the debate when you get into the mineral discussion. Where is legislation appropriate? And that's where my attitude is coming from in that context.
yeah, like a couple of years. So pricing is how can you get away with it? Yeah, it's like, so a couple of years ago, there were very few recyclers, and there were not that many battery packs. So you probably charged as a recycler a couple of dollars per pound to recycle it. And it was fantastic. They made money. And now there is a lot more competition, a lot more advanced technologies, methods to recycle. For NMC, you now get, it's zero. So from a couple of dollars per pound to zero, that's quite significant. The biggest cost of recycling, and that's why economies of scale, efficiencies is so important, and setting good systems up, is therefore in the transportation. Because if the act of recycling is zero, then how to transport those battery packs in volume, how to collect them, how to really optimize that stream, that is the key. Because that is still that will be the highest cost. There's one other thing, can I say? Because Lee mentioned the word perishable, and very important, and then you asked the question, should we store batteries? If you store lithium ion and it has a high SOC, which you don't know because you can't see it, you can't smell it, and you keep it in a warm environment for a long time, and a long time can be as little as 2 weeks, you basically destroy the battery pack. So if it has, so I always say lithium-ion battery pack is a little bit like a fish. If it's fresh, it's delicious, you want to eat it, you pay money for it. If it's rotten, you know, it stinks and it's a liability. So that's another reason to have a really efficient reverse supply chain to get those battery packs in case they have a high SOC. And the higher the SOC, also the more energy it contains, which can be an issue from a safety perspective.
I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, don't miss out on our next conference and expo. We're going to have tons of amazing educational sessions, tech talks, networking with your peers, all of the vendors that you need to speak to take your business to the next level, and amazing amenities. Don't miss out.